story written, a short story, produced by Sitiveni Ratuviri, when he was with the Pacifica Communications some years back, 1970s and 80s. And he produced a booklet which contained poems and short stories from around the Pacific. And he recorded this story that was submitted by Reverend Leslie Fugui. Yes. And in the short story it says, in summary, the story was about a teacher asking this little boy of the class who discovered the Solomon Islands. And the little boy, one of them said, "It was my grandfather." And of course he got corrected on his information, and exactly what Josephine said, it was the Spanish who discovered the Solomon Islands. The second story is to do with, it's related. The second story is to do with Maori Nui. And I think 2 years ago, the church changed its name from Maori Protestant Church to
since
now
2003,
2004.
11 years.
There was a process of debate and painful arguments on why they should change from a colonial name to a more self-determining name. And these two stories are a lead up to what is Nuclear Freedom Independence Pacific. And it is basically to do with the bottom line of the movement, which is founded in 1975 by students from the University of South Pacific. And some of them we know. Amelia Rotibuna, who has since passed away. Reverend Aquila Mbaki, who was then a student at USP. And a few others, I think Papa John Tung from Maui.
Yeah.
Those from Hawaii and New Zealand, Aotearoa, New Zealand. But they were students at that time, and of course Juliana Siwatimbao. But they were passionate people on what is the Pacific at the time, in the 1970s and the 80s. And so they started this movement, basically addressing several issues. One is on the nuclear testing, which, by the way, they had a march in through Suva in 1997. And I remember that march was the former Minister of Education, Dr. Wakatali, was at that march, and she was relieved of her position.
95.
95. She was relieved of being a minister in the government because she took part in that march. But nuclear testing. The second thing is to do with the political self-determination of the islands. And then there was on indigenous issues. But now, in the early 2000s, they expanded their mandate to include things like climate change, militarization, and other ones. What is important to celebrate? Because the NFIP movement, while still is a collection of individual organizations, is still very much alive. The Secretariat, PCRC, has since folded, meaning that it's no longer in existence. But what is important to celebrate in as far as the NFIP movement is concerned is one key thing. They gave to us the whole process of reframing. And that's important to remember, to celebrate that. And Pili Haofo picked it up in his days at USP to talk about the Sea of Islands, as referred to the Pacific, So you start with the concept of reframing, and we do that all the time. We manipulate whatever information we want to do, we give it out to the public, but from our perspective. The media does that all the time, very well. The thing about reframing is that, well, I was talking about it this morning about failed states, and that's a reframing issue. Solomon Islands, Fiji, and Papua New Guinea has been talked about as the ark of instability. But those phrases are not an invention of the Pacific, are inventions of people who are outside the Pacific and frame it as such because the benefits of foreign investment in terms of security and peace is much more conducive to them than to us. But that's the idea in terms of NFIB gave us the process of reframing who we are in the region by simply asking questions of nuclear powers who came and tested nuclear in the region. Because the original frame is that the Pacific Island countries is a backwater region. And therefore you can dump anything that you want within the region. Human security that Josephine talks about, now healthy living healthily. Because we are no longer doing healthy living anyway. We've been eating lamb flaps. Some years ago, a few years ago, Tama was very much famous for eating fatty lamb flaps in New Zealand. But there was a protocol or an agreement that we no longer buy, our governments at least, muddy lamb flaps in New Zealand. So when we talk about human security, it's not simply to say that we now going to have to eat healthily, or even, but you have to enter into the process of reframing who we are. And so that's an important thing. Who framed women as weak? I mean, who gave that frame? Before, a story was told that before Papua New Guinea was colonized, women were held in very much high respect. But then the new frame came in and divided that. And ever since the colonial times in Papua New Guinea, violence had took place ever since against women. So who provided that frame? The Pacific Island countries it is a backwater region. Much like the teacher who said that, no, it's not your grandfather who discovered the Solomon Islands. And if you ask a student, say in the 1987 in Fiji, who discovered Fiji, they will say, Edwin Desmond? Yeah. But who gave that frame? I think the question for peace and security is to ask that question, who framed it? Who framed us as weaklings? That we simply cannot respond to our conflict issues and our peace issues. And when whoever put a frame to us, the consequence is that our traditional ways of peace building, of constructing security measures, are put on the wayside. I mean, you look at Iraq and the wars in Iraq, the wars in Afghanistan, and the security that went into it. I mean, who benefits really from those conflicts? The arms manufacturers who give them. Who really benefit? Not necessarily the Afghan people or the Iranians, themselves, or the Egyptians. So the point I'm trying to say is that the NFIP movement since the 1970s and 80s, the approach may be different, very activist and confrontational, but they attempted to reframe the Pacific of our region according to what we believe it should be. and how for call it right. I mean, we are zero violence together. But come to think of it, it is very, very, I mean, it has some consequences in terms of who then should we take further responsibility for our self-determination. So that's what I wanted to share with you this morning. We celebrate the nuclear-free and independent Pacific. And what do we celebrate? What are we celebrating? The movement is not necessarily as strong as it used to be. But what we are celebrating is the reframing process that they gave us today in our region. We ask in terms of the churches, and the churches have a lot to answer for in terms of the frame that so many of us have lived under and schooled into. A frame that people with different sexual orientations are evil. The churches have a role to play in. The frame that says that we are economically underdeveloped. A frame that says that the environment is at the mercy of human beings and therefore you can exploit it. And a frame that says that women are there for the use of men. And so not only the churches but religions as well contributed to those frames. The thing is to reframe it. That's our challenge. Thank you.